Hey, everybody. Welcome to Tattva Tuesday. This is Lindsay Warwick, the conduit on Spotify and YouTube. Super excited. Took a little bit of a break, but happy to be back this week with my friend Lorraine. She is a relationship expert, right?
Yes.
You know what? You're confident in saying it, so I'm here for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll just get right into it. It's like been a couple weeks for me. I feel like I'm new all over again, and I love that. Always a student in all the things. So Tattva Tuesday. Tattva is a Sanskrit word that means truth. So we'll talk about your truth here. And where I love to start is, first I'll just talk about how I met Lorraine. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Such a beautiful person. So I'm part of a goddess collective group on Facebook. And I had reached out to my dear friend Leah DeLuzio, who has she is the creator of that group. And I was going through a lot of trauma from a previous relationship, and Lorraine had offered, without even knowing who the person was, to hold a free therapy session. And so that's how we met, on the beach at the state park. And I'm never going to forget that you offered that, and you're so kind. And ever since, we become friends, and now my dog loves you. And
I love your dog.
yeah, and you guys love each other. It's a mutual love for sure. So it's really good to see you and have you on the podcast. And yeah, so thank you. Thank you for saying yes.
Yeah, I'm so honored. I feel valued. Being invited to have this conversation with you really demonstrates value. And we've had such wonderful conversations. I know that when I was younger, I wish I could have been witness to conversations like you and I have. So I hope that people have an opportunity to be part of a conversation that they might not otherwise be exposed to.
Yes, we've had some amazing conversations, and just I feel like all of some of those really deep ones have happened on the beach. And that's why I wanted to invite you on here, because you're just a wealth of knowledge and experience. And so let's kind of get started with your spiritual journey.
Okay, yeah.
And kind of how you got into therapy and relational expertise.
Sure, yeah. Okay. And actually, I want to start by saying too, when I I knew that you were in crisis, and I was drawn to meeting you for a consultation because I worried, what resources you had access to, and I didn't know any details, but I had no idea where this was going to turn into a friendship, and we let that professional relationship go almost immediately, right? To continue this friendship. So in my spiritual journey and how I found my path or purpose to what I'm doing, it was almost like by accident, right? As when I was young, I always felt out of place. I always had this longing and knowing that something was missing, like the being in the world didn't quite fit me. And I was told by my siblings that I was probably dropped off by aliens, and that mommy and daddy felt sorry for me, and so they just took me in. And I knew that wasn't real, but I felt like that. I never felt like I'm part of this world. And so when I heard this phrase, this made a lot of sense to me, that I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. That really cued me in. So I think I've always been on a search for spirituality, because I always had this sense that there is something missing, or something not right, or something not fitting in this world. And I don't know if I would say I was raised Catholic, but I was exposed to the Catholic Church early on, not that I went to church often. And I have, from a very early age, it's been easy for me to separate out history and tradition and spirituality. I was never confused or angry about God because of church. And I knew that some of the priests and nuns that I met were grumpy people, but I never confused that for spirituality or God.
Right.
I was always able to see that as separate. And I honor the history and the tradition and the rituals in Catholicism and Christianity. And now I'm exposed to so many other religions and their rituals. But it all has to do with in my mind, the way that I've come to understand it is that it has something to do with our imagination and how we make meaning of things. So it doesn't matter what our organized religion is, if it makes sense to us and that we draw a meaning from it, and it lives in connection, right? So that connection has always been part of how I see spirituality. And maybe those early years of not feeling like I fit anywhere was that disconnect, knowing that I felt disconnected from so many things and seeking a connection and things. So through my story, I have had used large amounts of alcohol and drugs to ease that disconnect before I found spirituality. And from that pain and trouble, it brought me to a place of really needing connection. And I feel like I'm getting lost in this story, like, because it's so complex. There's so many threads, like there's so many different things that I could say, and then it's all woven together. I'm a mom, and I have a son who has a challenge that, really sent me into a place of seeking also, because it wasn't what I hoped and dreamed. And so I had to find a way to be okay in the powerlessness of what it's like to be in that situation. And so I would say, like, right, any of us, the troubles in my life brought me deeper to spirituality. Mm-hmm. My understanding of a higher power or a God is really very abstract and broad. I borrow from several different organized religions and kind of have created my own in the spirit of the universe, but always nature is the easiest way for me to feel a sense of something that is outside of myself. So whatever that being or that source is, it is anything that brings me some sense of stability in a unpredictable world that is not myself, right? It's outside of myself. Mm-hmm. So, and I have so much more to say, but I feel like I better pause because I could just keep talking.
Yeah. I mean, I find that through I've been doing this podcast for a year, basically. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's been breaks in life happens and I take a break, or it just doesn't work out with the guest and that I had scheduled, and it's okay. I'm like, okay, this is just how it's supposed to be. But I see a lot of commonality in the podcast of, well, I was seeking something outside of myself, or I was going through a hard time, and boom, that harder time is, where we make the effort to go in. Like, right. We think it's with that, we think it's out, right? Mm-hmm. But then it's like we're reading and doing all these things and learning the different religions and everything, and then we find out that it's all really inside. And I think that's so beautiful. Like, that was my whole vision for the podcast, is to show that Lorraine, you come from somewhere completely different than, I think my last guest was John, y'all are very different, but we're all the same in certain aspects. So, thank you for sharing that part of your story, and don't feel like you're talking too much. Like, this is your time, and I'll get in, where when I need to.
So you'll stop me when it's time. Yeah. But I'm glad to hear you reflect on that. Like, no matter who you talk to, from wherever they are, that it's this journey of what I would call the hotter the fire, the purer the gold, right?
Oh, yeah.
Fire, and then this brilliance comes out on the other side.
I call it the alchemy. Like, I wrote an article a couple years ago called Pain is the Alchemy of the Human Spirit. And it's like, yeah, Like pain is like that catalytic moment where it's like, well, I can drink more alcohol, or I can smoke more weed, or do more drugs, and I can go in, I can try to push off the pain, but really when I think I'm pushing it off, I'm just bringing it more in. Or I use that pain as that moment of turning that pain into something more beautiful, like alchemizing the pain.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but I think that when I'm hearing you talk about that universal story and that universal connection, it makes me think about relationships and love and desire and and humans throughout all cultures throughout the world all want to be wanted, right? We all want to be wanted. We all want to be desired. And whether that's a romantic, emotional intimacy or romantic intimacy or sex intimacy, that's another area where I see, no matter who you talk to, where they come from, everyone wants to be wanted. And I had a mentor who would teach me, and I also, so I found through this path, I've also found that here I am as I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm licensed into different states. And I've had amazing mentors through that work, but it really is about who I am too, right? It's all our mood and our self-concept is based in the relationships that we are in, the relationships that we vision ourselves in the future or hope to be in, the relationships we grew up in, even the relationships of the generations before us that we are not even aware of. Relationships with the universe, the trees, the ground, a relationship with food, right? So it's all about relationships. And that is how I think and believe way before I got a license as a marriage and family therapist.
That's great.
Yeah, of course, that's the work I do because that is how I think anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. And I mean, yeah, like tell us, how did you, obviously that's the way that you think, so that's a given, but like how did you like get into, and then you say you're a relationship expert, so like what qualifies you as a relationship expert? And I'm so glad you're on the podcast because we've dabbled on the podcast with different questions and people will, about relationships, because life is about how are we relating to everything. Right. And a couple of people have said, well, I'm no relationship expert, but you are. So
yes. So, and I'll tell you how I came to own that expertise.
Yes, tell me.
So, yeah, when I was young, I read Thomas Merton's No Man is an Island, and that was like the seed of like, yes, we are not alone. And and actually probably going back to school and getting my degree as a marriage and family therapist was not about wanting to be a marriage and family therapist. That was about wanting to do something else and just wanting to be academic. And I like studying, and this is a topic I like studying. So I never had this vision and goal of where I was going. But while I was a student, and I really enjoy studying, and why not enjoy studying a topic that you love? So, I mean, if you're reading on your free time, Thomas Merton, No Man is an Island,
I'm going to write it down.
You may as well get a degree because that's not light reading.
No Man is an Island?
No Man is an Island, and he's got great a bunch of great readings. That's the kind of book, like every sentence and every paragraph takes a while to digest because it's
it's one of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I started studying just for the sake of studying and just to be academic. In my program, I met mentors who just took me under their wing and encouraged me more. And I finished my degree, did some postgraduate work, and I was always invited. So I was invited to the internship that I went into. I was invited into postgraduate programs, postgraduate training. I was invited into a fellowship. I was invited to a writing fellowship. I was invited to teach as an adjunct professor. And I always just said yes. So that's how I started my career, was just by those invitations. I left my first job before licensed, I left. Really, it's hard to work in a clinic, right? Early career, I needed the experience to get my license in a clinic, but it's hard to work in a clinic. There's a lot of restraints, and meeting the needs of individuals is really hard under that system. And so I left and went into private practice, and then opened up another practice in another state, because people who knew I was a family therapist said, where do you practice? We need to see you here. I have people I want to refer. So I opened up an office and people started showing up. I had a supervision group where one of my mentors would say frequently, you need to own your expertise. And really, when you're new and are starting out, it's hard to find that confidence. And so I had that encouragement, and it was a piece of work for that area of and I've had great supervision too. I always say that too. Like, I know that I'm really good at what I do, and I take a lot of time and energy to take care of myself so that I'm available, and so that I can hear my intuition and use the gifts that I have in the work that I do. But the other part is that I'm nerdy, and I studied hard, and I read a lot of books. And I had a lot of wonderful, wonderful mentors who taught me. So I owe them a lot of gratitude that I had people before me who really led me down this road. So that I've been invited to teach family therapy at, a variety of places and speak. And so something I have to say must be valuable. But it wasn't until this, Lindsay, where I really felt like I understood that I was an expert. So that I practiced in Manhattan and in Westchester, New York, and I have a small practice in rural Vermont. Where there's a different community and a different population.
Yeah.
And it was an old New England farmer, right? That just different kind of personality, who in different identity and social location, who, after having met me in therapy because of a crisis that the whole family was in, called me some months later to say, I think that after meeting you, and I have chest pains, my doctor said it's stress and I need therapy. I want to come see you. And Lindsay, I don't know if you're hearing like the magnitude of that kind of New England older generation accepting therapy might be a good idea for him because he met me. That's when I'm like, I'm an expert.
Yeah.
So that was a significant change. But since then, it really has been, it's not that I call myself an expert, and yes, I'm licensed in 2 different states as a marriage and family therapist. So there's some level of expertise there. It is the work that I've done and the clients that I've worked with who have given me that title, right? That kind of like, I have that title because it is what's been given to me by those people who have experienced work with me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I think it's amazing. And yeah, definitely. Excuse me, you have that natural ability and you have your natural gifts. And then of course you put the work in as well. I think that that's a huge component to being successful. I think, I was actually just talking about this with one of my coworkers today. He was asking me about yoga and how long I've been doing it. And I was like, yeah, I've been doing it for a long time. And I still do continuing education. Like I still do trainings when I can, because, gotta keep on top of our game,
Yeah.
So what do you want to discuss?
Yeah.
I know we always have these fabulous conversations about marriage and relationships, and
so let's go to that. And like you talked about continuing education being so important. One of the things that and maybe it's just because it's what I'm looking at, but sex relationships, right? If we are in a culture where committed, long-term, monogamous relationships are the expectation. However, the statistical outcome of infidelity and divorce is so high. it's time to start rethinking. And certainly marriage and family therapy is an industry that is starting to research and rethink what's wrong with that story, how can we change it, and expand the theme and the perspective around that. And we're also in a time too, in terms of marriage relationships, that there is so much more expectation of what we get out of that relationship. And I'm looking at it, my industry is talking about it, but I don't hear many people outside of that having these conversations, right? So what is a traditional relationship? And we're still expecting it, although it's the most uncommon outcome of a marriage. And we're at a time that we're expecting emotional satisfaction and pleasure, sexual pleasure, right? And financial partnership.
From one person.
From one person, right. Historically, marriage has been really about sharing household expenses, sharing duties, a lot of other things. We historically would get our emotional comfort and nurturing from other female friends, from family, not from a husband. That's a very new dynamic, generationally speaking. And then this transformation towards, in our sexuality, towards also from being a dutiful wife in the bedroom to having a empowerment and expecting sexual satisfaction in the bedroom. This is all really relatively new.
Yeah, this is getting me thinking. So I don't know if maybe you didn't, but Jessica Dervage was on my podcast like a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And she really opened up the conversation about marriage and, what is the norm, societal norm versus what's going on. And she did speak pretty openly about her own situation and the idea of opening up more, as they go along on their path together. So me, I'm 34 and I'm not married. I have not been married. I was close to being engaged, but I just didn't feel like that was my person. He was a great man, but he was not my person. Mm-hmm. Which also makes me wonder what you said, like, are we supposed to have one person that checks all the boxes?
Right.
And growing up, like the whole idea, my parents got divorced when I was 7. So it's like, the whole idea of that, I didn't grow up with that. I grew up with a separate house, God, there was so much that you said, my brain just started going off. But yeah, so I was watching the House of Dragons, like the Game of Thrones thing. Okay. Yeah, it's medieval times basically. Okay. But the marriage is literally an arrangement. It's like, your house has this and my house has this. And even like the woman in the show last night, the queen was like having sex with the king. And she looked like she would rather die than like have sex with this man. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that was part of her duty as a wife, was to, join the houses and bear heirs. Right. It was like, it didn't really matter like if she was getting pleasure or not. And it was like, in the one scene, she's laying down and she's about to go to sleep, and some woman comes in and is like, "Oh, the king is calling for you." And she's like, "Right now?" And then she had to go and like sleep with him. It's so interesting that you brought that up, because that's exactly what came to my mind last night when I was watching it. I was like, "Ooh, that doesn't look fun. Like, that sucks."
Yeah. And when I think nobody's talking about, I forget sometimes, like you're a younger generation than, so maybe, right? Hopefully, like you're growing up with a different narrative than I grew up with, and that, but it will take some time for the system to catch up with all of that. Mm-hmm. I think of that too. There are couples, if they're trying to conceive a baby, they're still struggling with this, like, what is the sex relationship? It still has the purpose of procreation. And if you're trying and having trouble having a baby, what does that do to intimacy at a sexual level? The other interesting dichotomy as we are merging all of these expectations in relationships are that we want adventure and interesting and some je ne sais quoi still in our relationships, but at the same time, we want stability and predictability and all of this evenness that comes along with it. And they are, many couples have a hard time managing that duality, right? We pursue in dating, we are pursuing this commitment stability traditionally. And then when we get it, much of the sexual desire fades away, right? And then
why does that happen?
Huh?
Why does that happen?
Because the desire is about something that you want, that you haven't gotten yet, right? But we also want some predictability in relationships. And so once we get the predictability, stability, that commitment, we don't want that anymore. We already have it. And so it needs to be created, and it takes a little, and it can be done, right? But those are not conversations that people are having. Usually while they're dating, they're not talking about what will it look like when, right? I know a lot of people are talking about love languages, right? And then there are, right? There's a sixth love language, which is freedom. And what is it? Freedom and flexibility. I think nobody's talking about that one. And I think it's a scratch of the surface.
That might be mine.
Well, and I will say
the bonus love language is mine.
Yeah. I think that those kinds of popular concepts are really great place to start conversations. But you and I know we're more fluid than that's our category.
Yeah.
We might have some of this and some of that. And then as the stars change, we might flow into another area.
Yeah. Right. So when I was at dinner the other night with a bunch of women, and they were talking about like early stages of dating and the questions. I'm laughing because the questions that they wish they asked, like the men that they're seeing or they're married to or dating long term, like, are you a narcissist? Are you a misogynist? How did you grow up? Like, what do you see for yourself? Like, what do you believe are gender roles? Like, they were going in and in, and I was like, oh my God, like, you know.
I wish I was part of that conversation, Lindsay. I would have said, you need to be asking what's your erotic blueprint.
What is that? I was going to ask you, what are the questions that should be asked in the beginning?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm often talking with couples after they're in trouble, right? And then they found me because so we start with conversations that might have been useful if they had had them earlier. Like, what would it be? And even if it is it doesn't suit, even if it does not suit a couple, couples are avoiding the conversation. So when I invite the conversation, it doesn't mean that they ought to, or that that's something that they need to be exploring, and we need to be talking about it at least, right? So yeah, what would it mean to have more than one sexual partner in the relationship, simultaneously or synchronously, asynchronous or synchronous? And how would that feel for both partners? Now, again, it's not that that's suggesting that that's needed, but certainly a conversation about it is useful. In
the beginning?
What would you wait for? What are you waiting for, right?
Okay.
Or the other one is infidelity. What is infidelity? You know, the age of technology has brought in all new layers of infidelity that people didn't know. I mean, really, I've worked with people, and this happens in couples therapy, that one partner is talking online pretty explicitly or even video chatting with sexual entertainment. And the partner finds that as a betrayal. And the partner's like, oh, had I known, I wouldn't have done that. But they never talked about how they define infidelity, right? And right, and what is the definition of that? So I don't know. So if the ladies at the table the other night were talking about what were the questions, what do you think they would have said about what is infidelity? How do you define infidelity?
I don't know. I wish I would have asked that question, but yeah, they were saying, you know, in the beginning, they wish that they had asked their husband partner, to like, would you ever take a conscious relationship course? Like, do you care about that kind of a thing? And yeah, they were saying all kinds of shit. I was like, oh my God, no wonder I'm not married yet. Or I don't know. I just don't know. I'm, you know, just going through my own journey, you know, learning and growing. And yeah, I don't know.
Right.
And yeah, I'm curious, what is the erotic blueprint? What is that?
It's kind of like the love languages, but for the bedroom, right?
Okay.
And so are you, and I don't know them all. And I wish I could reference the woman who came up with them, but I will have to search that out. Kinky, sensual, sexual, and there's 5 of them. Which ones did I say already? I forget.
Kinky,
erotic,
sensual.
Yeah. So is it about touch? Oh, sensory, right? So if you are somebody who is into kink, if you're turned on by kinky bedroom behaviors, and that includes binding, then if your erotic blueprint has to do with touch, that's not going to work for you, right? That's going to be a conflict if you're bound and not able to feel your partner in the ways, right? So it's
So it's like, how it's like basically like your sexual chemistry, like broken out into categories,
right?
Of
right.
sorts. Now there's a book. I'm sure there's a book.
Yep.
What is the book?
Yeah. And so it is.
Wait, what's the book?
Oh, I don't. Probably erotic blueprints. Right, but it removes this idea that there is a judgment to, hey, if you don't want to try something adventurous in the bedroom, that there's something wrong with you. It just might be that your erotic blueprint. So couples can start to have a different conversation with each other about sex. There's a lot of guilt and shame around sex, and so those are hard conversations for couples to have. People come to couples therapy, and I ask them about sex, and they don't want to talk about it. I'm like, this is couples therapy. We're going to talk about sex, and we're going to talk about money.
Yeah, literally. And love and money are connected energetically. I'm glad that we're having this conversation, because I've been on the shamanic rose priestess path for a while now. And a lot of it is about empowering sexuality, sacred sexuality. And I, had a conversation with my shaman, like recently, just about like, eroticism and, like how important it is and all of this. And I really do feel like it's going to be a major component in my future to help with tantra, with women and couples and all of that. I just have always kind of known, I've just known things like since, from past lives or whatever. So it's definitely, I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I've had, some women reach out to me too. I guess they feel safe to reach out and talk to me about like sex and, like masturbation and whatever. Like, how do I empower myself? How do I get rid of this shame and guilt around it? And I'm like, I will help you. You know what I mean? Like, I just want people to experience like, life and pleasure the way that I feel like it's supposed to be experienced.
Yeah. And I think I know that about you. And our conversations are so interesting because I'm all about empowering couples to know that they're their own best experts. And I'm able to coach them in having the conversation so that they can explore with each other what works, what makes sense, and what are their what are the obstacles that are getting in the way of even having those conversations? Some of the things that I often ask or invite, I wonder if this is a dating question. It'd be interesting to find out. But what are your first sexual messages? Meaning in your upbringing, in your family of origin, or in your teen experiences, what were you taught about sex? What were the implicit messages or explicit messages about sex?
Mm-hmm.
Were you caught masturbating and somebody shamed you about that? And what does it mean? The other piece is too, are you an initiator or are you not an initiator? Couples don't talk about that often.
What happens if you get two people that don't initiate?
Right. Well,
no one's ever gonna have sex.
They come to couples counseling because they're not having sex and they're very unhappy.
Yeah, I just feel like sex is such a big, I mean, for me, it's just a big part of who I am and having a relationship. That being said, I stopped engaging in casual, like, sexual relations. Usually it's been with, somebody that I'm interested in or whatever, it's not been like, oh, I'm gonna just go and because it's an energy sex, sacred energy exchange too. So that's part of the Rose priestess path as well. So yeah, that's so interesting. What happens if you get two people that don't initiate? Then it's not happening.
And then we talk about, like, why are you not initiate? Often the not initiating is about fear of rejection. And then that gets tangled up into, if you are approaching your partner and making overtures for sex and demonstrating desire, and they're really just not in the mood, or, have that headache, they may be not wanting to reject you, but it lands as a rejection. It doesn't matter, when we are, so you dance in that very challenging nuance of what are the meanings. And if you're not having conversations about it, you're left with hurt feelings or triggering old stories of what happened in your last relationship or the messaging that you got growing up. And so it's getting people to talk about it, right? How much everyone is having sex, right? Sex is happening all over and people are doing it. Nobody's talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's interesting. So as a therapist, then let's say there's so many topics I feel like we could talk about. I really want to revisit, couples come to you when there's a problem. Mm-hmm. Like, is there like a patterning to, like, the timelines for people to come to therapy? Or do you think that people jump into things too quickly before they really know each other and then they're committed? Or I don't know. I just tell me all the things.
So interesting. I don't know. And I think we're progressing towards understand. When I learned life cycle stages, divorce was not a life cycle stage. When we teach life cycle stages now, divorce is one of the life cycle stages. That we have an understanding that you will have more than one relationship in your lifetime. Mm-hmm. A long-term committed relationship. There'll be more than one. So we're starting to embrace that is becoming the new normal. Although, I'm married for a long time, and I believe this too. If you're in a long-term committed relationship, and by the way, that doesn't exclude ethical non-monogamy. When I say a long-term committed relationship, there's a lot of varieties to that, right? That when I use that language, there's a lot of room for that. Where was I though? Within that same person, you'll have a lot of different relationships. I was just talking to Nancy Weiss about this over the weekend, that I've been married to my husband for 30, I think it's 31 or 30, somewhere between 31 and 33 years. He'll know better than I do. But I feel like we've had different relationships. Like, I wasn't the same person. He's not been the same person. It's been good. It's been bad. But we have certainly had different relationships throughout all of the years. If it was the same, it would be over.
I saw the most beautiful thing. I don't know where the quote came from, but it was like, to be in a long-term relationship is to attend 1,000 funerals of your partner, of the people that they used to be. Yeah. And then, like, continue, continue on with them. And that's what I guess I have to say, like a long relationship intimidates me in that way, because I know how I have a lot of scorpionic aspects in my birth chart. I'm very transformative, like very transformative. And I'm, it's like, how do you, trust somebody, I guess, to continue on that journey with you? And then how do you know that they're going to love all aspects of you?
Right. And so for you, that freedom and flexibility.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my love languages. Like you do you and I'll do me. Like,
yes. So you wanted to find that out during the dating phase, or you just accept right away, like that, there's that new conscious uncoupling, or the relationships are complete. It does no longer has to be, and I think we're changing this narrative. No longer does that has to be this disastrous divorce.
No
story. It's relationships end. They can complete in a healthy way. And I do some of that work too. Some couples who come to me so that they can part. They know they're ready to part, and they just want to do it well.
In a healthy way.
Right. Yep. And so I think we are starting to learn that we're going to have more than one relationship in our life. It's okay that they're with different people. And if they're with the same person, it's still going to be more than one relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You asked me something else about timing, right? So is there a timing? I will say during pandemic, when
are there rules? Are there dating rules? You're the relationship expert. What are the dating rules?
So I don't know. Expert doesn't mean that I make up the rules or that I know the rules.
Oh, okay.
I will say, I always tell people, like, I read a lot of books, but you're the best expert on you.
Oh yeah.
I have a lot of, and maybe that's where my expertise lies, in that I know what I don't know.
I love that.
Yeah. And that people,
but elaborate.
Yeah. So I know what I don't know. So I've read a lot of books, and I have a lot of, however, and I love my work for that too, right? As much as I think I've got I see couples, and there's this thing that I see often. There's always going to be a couple that I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? I've never seen this before. And it's new and exciting. And that's what I mean. Like, I know when I haven't seen this before, I don't have the answer to this, but I trust people to know themselves well enough, even though they don't believe it yet, that I can encourage people to be empowered or find their power to trust their own expertise.
Mm-hmm. So I guess, back to the timing question was like, you said, oh, well, couples will come to me when they have a problem. Is there a pattern or anything that you see, like a time frame?
Right. So a couple of things. During the pandemic, when people were home together, they were like, hey, two things. Some of them were like, hey, we've always wanted to go to therapy. We got nothing to do right now. We got all this time on our hands. Let's call a therapist. That was delightful, Lindsay. I love that work.
Yeah, that was probably good, because I'm a big therapy advocate. I went to therapy for a while, and I remember her telling me that therapy is not for the crisis moments. Therapy is for all the normal life moments.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, oh God, I'm having a problem, I need to go to therapy. Therapy is like, it's how you can learn like just life skills and everything. So I love that you said that there were couples that were like, yeah, fuck it, we'll just go.
Yeah, we've always wanted to. Now is a good time.
We'll give it a try.
Yeah. So, and the other thing that I will say about, I don't know if there's a timing rule or you hear that 7-year itch. I don't know where that came from, but that's an old story. But old stories have some meaning. I don't know what it is though.
I don't know what it is either.
But it is important, the timing, right? So when couple comes to me, I ask them it's important to find out a couple of things. Why now? Like, why? Because I know people don't come to therapy first. So I know
they don't.
Something now brought them. So that's important for me to understand, because that timing is a clue to where to go and what's happening. And the other thing is, and what else have they tried? Because I know people come try a lot of other things before they come to therapy.
Mhm.
And so often, maybe it's about this, right? That change, in order to get to change, the pain has to be worse
Great.
than the discomfort. Here's what it is: the discomfort of how it exists, because change is uncomfortable for people, right? We know that.
Yes.
Everyone knows change is even good change is uncomfortable. So the discomfort of what is happening in the current circumstance has to be worse than the change. And who knows when that happens? It's different for you, it's different for me, it's different for everybody. So it's just, but it's that tipping point of the current circumstance is more uncomfortable than the potential need for change.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's pain is a great motivator. Absolutely. It's kind of goes back to where we started with are you going to alchemize your pain into something greater, or are you going to just numb your pain, or just go, fuck up your life, I guess, with pain. But God, I thought of something else when you were speaking. Oh man. Can we talk a little bit about, in the beginning of relationships, do you feel like people kind of like, I call it their representative. Like, I'm going to bring my representative. I'm not going to like bring my true aspects of self yet. I'm just going to bring my representative. I'm going to put on my mask.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you think a lot, because you have been doing this work for a long, long time, do you think all people do that?
I hope all healthy people do that.
Put on their representative.
Right. Yeah. It's a persona, right?
Yeah.
It tells me that you have a filter, right? If you show up it's an interview, basically a date is an interview. And if you show up with no filter,
90-day trial period, right?
If you show up with no filter
and return.
Yeah. And if you show up with no filter, Lindsay, I'm worried. So, but you bring up a really interesting point, right? That we as adults, we know when to have the persona of professionalism, when we have the persona with our silly friend group, and the different masks that we put on. So in dating, where you're potentially going to be the deepest spiritual, emotional, intimate relationship of your life, you show up with a mask on.
I know. And I have a hard time with masks. I think it's because I can see energy and read energy. And so it's hard for me to kind of, I play the game, but you know what I mean? Maybe not.
I'm not sure I'm understanding. Say more about it.
So I can see the masks. And I, have a hard time, I just know that it's a mask. Like I'm very perceptive energetically. I'm very, very intuitive. I can see stuff right away. And that's who I am. And it's, but I still will abide by the filters.
Okay, that's interesting. And so, and I know that about, so it does make sense, because I think I know that about you already, that you have that sight, that
it's
vision.
A great gift. It's a blessing and a curse, because it's like, I know things right away. And it's like, it's going to be a yes for me, or it's a no for me right away. It's not like, I don't feel full, like, not that people are coming with their masks to fool. I think they're coming with the masks as a protection. And, that's how they know how to be. It's interesting. I think.
Yeah. And for me, probably I see a little bit more, I would call myself a behaviorist, or I'm a behaviorist by nature, and behavior communicates meaning. So I'm able to know the truth before somebody tells it to me, because I'm reading their behavior. And I believe behavior. And and it took me a long time. I don't know if you knew this, Lindsay, right? So I always thought everyone could see that and knew that.
I thought everyone could see it and know it too, but I thought people could see and feel the way I see and feel, but I know that is not true.
Yeah, same here. I thought everyone knew the truth like I did. So it took me a long time to learn. Not everyone can see that. So when you're dating, and do you tell people that you can, or do you invite them? So like, hey, I notice this. So curiosity is always a great lead in relationships. Observation and curiosity, great tools. So I've observed that you behave this way.
Mm.
I'm curious about what that means and invite people to say about it. So I don't know, for you, would it be, I noticed, I don't know, how do you tell people, I notice your aura is really dark. Can you tell me what that's about?
I feel that, I kind of try to let people know who I am. Like, I do yoga, I'm an intuitive, I do Reiki, I do readings, I can see things. Like, I kind of give them a little, I observe,
Yeah.
I allow, and that's been something I've been working on, is just allowing people to just be who they are and observing them, and allowing for a trust to build and a deeper connection to build. And then I'm not one to like sweep under the rug anything. If there's something that is a little off,
Right.
I will probably say it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I like to be very transparent, and I've also worked on the balance of the transparency. It's like,
Mhm.
you don't need to really say all of that,
Right.
So it's definitely, the relationship with myself has been the most important thing to me, especially over the last year, since I've known you. And
Right.
working on those aspects of self, because I am a very, strong presence.
Right.
So yeah, I'm,
You know what, more, I think that, you have a unique obstacle in that you might see more clearly than some. But many people I speak to about dating are navigating this balance of accepting human error
mhm.
and running away from red flags, right? So how much do you forgive people for human error? And then how much do you say, wait a minute, these are messages that I shouldn't go any further in this? And I think I'm hearing many people in dating having trouble navigating the right balance of that.
Yes, I've actually asked this question on the podcast before as well. And it's like, finding the balance of that. And then it's like, are there red flags aren't necessarily universal, because what's a red flag to me might not be a red flag to you. And so really, I think relationships are a container for our spirit. I love what you said, spiritual being, having a human experience. When you are in a container, whatever that relationship looks like, you're able to identify what works and what doesn't for you, and use it as sort of an exploratory space. And I think, I don't know, it's like, finding the balance of human error. What is human error? And then what is, okay, well, that's just a red flag.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
How do you?
And it's not an answer for one person, right?
Yeah.
It's a continued, like you said, relationship. If you have a solid relationship with yourself and you're talking with other good friends, right? Your spiritual community, or good female friend, or good friends, to bounce things off, and always self-reflecting and journaling, then you're going to discover that on your own, and you're going to find that answer on your own.
Oh, I know where I was going with that. It's using that space too, is you are the one with the, just like you said, like before, like you are your biggest expert. It's like, well, what feels good for me? Like, what does my heart say? What does my gut say, like, what's going on with me, because the way I handle situation is not going to be the way that you handle situation. And you're not the one in the relationship. I'm the one in the relationship. And so I have to be okay with whatever it is.
Yes. Yeah. And so the people who I have brought to find their own expertise and trust their own expertise are the ones who call me an expert. And they still will sometimes come to me and think Lorraine is going to tell me like her expert opinion about this particular thing that I'm going to do. And then we have a good laugh because they know I'm not really going to tell them.
Yeah.
I'm going to help them trust their own expertise.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think that there's, like, I know I'm jumping all over, but whatever. I feel like it's going to flow and sound great no matter what we do. Can we revisit like sex, I guess? Let's talk about sex. So in a relationship, like this whole idea, this is where I wanted to go with it, is like people have all different kinds of ideas of when you should have sex with the person that you're seeing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is there a rule
about the timing of that?
Yeah.
It depends, I suppose. Are you thinking about disease or,
Well, I mean, obviously there's that, but
yeah.
I don't know. Some people are like, well, we had sex right away and we're together forever. Or I waited a certain amount of time and that's how it worked. Is there?
So the sex is about pleasure and connection, right?
Yeah.
So if you're interested in pleasure and connection, and that it's going to show up that way in the relationship for both parties, sure, the timing is fine. But I think you can speak to the benefit and the variety of ways to achieve that and the benefit of abstinence too, right? If you're choosing not to, and we don't, I think we're at a time we're really embracing, especially women, having adventurous sexual experiences with a variety of partners, if that's what they choose to do, or abstaining from casual sexual relationships, if that's what they choose to do. Mm-hmm. And so, you know yourself best and decide, and what you choose to, and how anybody, because I'm speaking a little more about women, I tend to do that. Anybody who chooses, right? Because men can be considered promiscuous, can be judged for being promiscuous. I think that is starting to catch up, right? As much as women were historically judged for having more than one sexual partner. I am hearing more and more in couples that men are also starting to feel a shame and a judgment for having more than one, but I'm getting on a different subject. It is really up to the individual, right? Decide for yourself first, then decide together with your partner, and be flexible in the timing if that works for the both of you. And what you decide now may be different what you decide in another relationship.
Yeah, I think it all has to do with the energy between you and that person. And I'm like, I don't really think that there is a right or wrong. And I often feel like with dating and relationships, and I'm not an expert, I feel like there really aren't rules. Like, it's literally like you follow your intuition and your heart. And even if you make mistakes, it's how you learn. Mm-hmm. So it's all part of it.
Right. Yeah. That there are no rules.
Yeah. That it's just you and that person creating that container, whatever that looks like, whatever that's going to be, and just kind of moving, right. In that way. So
and that's dating and the sex relationship, same thing, that there are no rules except for those rules that are agreed upon. So if you're agreed upon for yourself, if you get value out of something for yourself, then continue operating that. If something is depleting you and you choose no longer participate in that, then don't do that. And the same thing for couples. There are no rules in how they decide to negotiate the relationship, except for is it bringing them connection, and is it bringing them pleasure?
Yeah.
Right. And under that, it could be anything.
I know. So we're like coming up on time, if you believe it or not.
I can't believe it. This conversation went so quickly.
So fast. Like
Yeah.
time doesn't exist. That's a whole other conversation. But
yeah, and I feel like we're barely scratched the surface. There's so
I know
we
didn't even talk about like ethical what is it?
Ethical non-monogamy.
Yes, we didn't even get to talk about that.
Training, right? We've talked about that clicker training idea too. And the restaurant menu sex thing.
Oh my God. Well, we have to have another podcast.
Right. Yeah. And let me add this too, even though I know we're out of time. When you say what's the timing to sex, I'm thinking very loosely. Are you talking about, penis vaginal intercourse, or is there some other definition to sex that the timing would be sooner or later, right? So there's so much
it's like there's no rules really.
Yeah.
Also, your cat is like behind you. It's so funny.
Yeah.
Well, so thank you, Lorraine, for being here. My God, we were all over the place, and it was so fun. I feel so high energy. I'd love to have you back, so we'll have to schedule that.
Okay.
But how can people contact you?
So anyone could Google my name, Lorraine Chastant, and find me.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Or if they can call you if they want to talk to me.
Just call me.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to the listeners or the viewers, however you're consuming this information. I want to just throw this out there to anyone who's listening or watching, that if there's anything that you want us to kind of expand upon, I feel like I'm ready to open up the podcast to tell me what you want to tell me what you want to hear. And if there's somebody that you would want to hear, I think I'm ready to open that up. That feels right. So y'all let me know out there, but thank you all so much for listening or watching. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of your week. Thanks, Lorraine.
Thank you.